my hair on my back goes up when if someone tries to attack somebody or take advantage of somebody that, in the community. Like, no.
For sure.
We ain't having that. You're not going to do that to that person. And I've seen a lot of people try to do it. I've supported people in our city employees that the city has tried to do that too over the years. We ain't doing it. And citizens, you're not going to do that to them. I'm more confident in being bold as far as my faith.
Welcome world, welcome family to another episode of the EL2A Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Gilmore Jr. And to the right of me, we have a very, very special guest. The gentleman to the right of me, man, he's done a lot for me. And I give him kudos, you know what I mean, in private, but I want to publicly recognize him. But we have former Mayor Kent Guinn with us today. How you doing, Mayor Guinn?
Hey, Jamie. Thank you for letting me be here with you today. Love it.
I appreciate you. So I do want to give you your flowers, man. So the Jamie Gilmore that moved back to Ocala in 2020, I came back, football was over. I really didn't know what I was doing. I had a master's degree,
right.
And I had purpose. I had a fire to help the youth, right? I had a fire, and I didn't have it when I came back, but I adopted it. I gained it through being here, seeing the need. One day, I was just sitting home. Man, I felt like there was no resources for me. I reached out to a couple people, and it seemed like most people would direct you to the school system, like to be a teacher. They were like, hey, did you try to teach? Like, that's the main thing. And I'm like, man, or did you coach? Do you want to coach football? And I'm like, man, like, I feel like God has something bigger for me, like a bigger purpose for me. I wrote up an email of my accolades, what I did and what I wanted to do. And I literally went online, ocala.gov, and looked up your email and email. At this time, never met you, nothing. It was just a blank email. And I really didn't even expect you to respond. I just sent it. You got to think about my level.
Yeah.
And when you thought about the mayor, right, I'm like, this mayor ain't worried about. Like, that's what I thought at that time. But, man, I received the email back from you that day. I emailed you that day, and I think I was in your office probably the next week or something like that. But in that conversation, through connecting with you, man, you connected a lot of dots with me, for me. One of those, Nancy Thrower, I remember you connecting us, connected me and PMC, Pastor Mark Cummins. He's on our board. Right. But those are key pieces of people you connected with me, connected me with, that has helped me to get to this position, right? So I definitely want to thank you for that.
Sure.
But on top of that, another one. The facility, where we house, we're cut different South Central Christian Church. We were at that time, we were in the social injustice time with the George Floyd, with the height of that time. It was 2020 and all that was going on. And there was meetings that were going on. The churches, the pastors, they were having meetings, a lot of meetings that were going on. One in particular, Chief Shane Alexander was a mentor to me. I used to meet with him all the time. Long story short, I was supposed to meet with him. At this meeting, he said, hey, I just got an emergency meeting somewhere. Meet me there. I didn't know where I was showing up to, but so happened when I showed up, it was at Church of Hope. That's the first time ever being at Church of Hope. But in that room, you were speaking that day. You didn't know I was there, but I had just shared with the pastor of Central Christian Church who I was and what I did. I just shared with him. He was like, that was cool. But when you started talking, you start speaking about cut different, and you start reaffirming everything I was just saying. So he nudged me. He was like, he's talking about you, right? And I was like, yeah. And from that moment, we went to lunch with the head of the pastor. And I was like, okay, at that time, I was trying to get some money, some donations from him. But he met me, he brought me to the campus, and he said, man, I think I got something bigger for you. And they gave us office space on campus, man. And that happened. All that came from you were a part of that story, man. So again, all that, I greatly appreciate you, man, for everything.
And I know you've talked about that in public too.
Yeah.
At some meetings, so I appreciate that. Yeah. But no, I believe in what you're doing. I mean, I was telling these gentlemen, being the mayor and overseeing the police department, I've seen the other side of these kids if they don't or not involved in what you're doing. It's not a good outcome.
For sure.
Not a good outcome.
Yeah.
And you'll, I'm sure, probably never, see their faces at the police department when we're talking about crime stat and this person was involved in this shooting or drugs or whatever, as a juvenile. because we had 14-year-olds stealing cars from DeLuca Toyota, and shootings and this, that, and the other. And it's just, there's just not a lot of hope. I was telling these young men that one particular neighborhood over near Vanguard, their thoughts of the future are I'm either going to be dead or in prison. That's not good. There's just no hope there. So, if that's what you think your future is going to be, you got nothing to lose, and that's a very dangerous situation, to be in.
And I appreciate you. So everything you're saying, we're going to get back to this. So everything he's saying, this goes into the bigger vision of what we do at Cut Different. So Cut Different Academy coming soon. What's up, EL2A family, man? Come invest in the futures that are going to change the world. What you see here right now, man, we are reimagining education, right? We are giving these young boys and showing them who they are and where they're going. We're creating a school-to-career pipeline, and it's happening right here on this property, man. So let's go, EL2A fan. We're going to have a QR code that pops up. You scan that code, all right? And it's going to take you and tell you everything you need to know to come help us invest in the futures that's going to change the world. Let's go. Again, come invest in the futures that are going to change the world. Again, this conversation of what we're talking about, this is why we do what we do. We're introducing young people to who they are and where they're going. We're giving them a bigger vision for themselves. I think as young men, as young men, you should always have a vision. And you can only do better if you know better. You can only know the possibilities of who you could become, or how can you dream to become something if you don't know it's possible, right? So I have to understand that it's possible and that I can obtain it. But that's what this whole ecosystem is about, man. We're building a school-to-career pipeline. A school-to-career pipeline here in Marion County. That's where young people know the opportunities that are available to them. They get trained, and then they go into these positions. So that's what it's all about. So again, Cut Different Academy coming soon. Come invest in the futures that are going to change the world. So to get back to you, one thing I really want to start, I was thinking about this as I was thinking about this conversation, right? My background, right? My whole process with athletics. I played athletics for a long period of my life, and my identity began to be wrapped in the game of football. So when football was done, I was like, what do I do? Right. So I asked that question, I asked that to you because a long part of your tenure of your life, you did public office, right? 12 years city council, 12 years mayor. And that recently a couple got like, it was just gone. Now you're not doing it. Right. I want to ask you this 2-part question. Who are you outside of that? Like, who are you? Yeah. And how did that affect you? Like, how was the transition?
That's a great question. Yeah. I'll answer the second one first. But I was telling somebody this the other day, said, after you leave, being the mayor, that was your identity. And I was like, well, who am I? I'm not Mayor Guinn anymore. I'm former mayor. I'm Kent Guinn. Who's Kent Guinn? Yeah. And it's like, so it was difficult. I probably the first like 4 to 6 months, I missed it. I would go to council meeting, a couple of times after I got out of office. And, but after that, 4 or 6 months, I really didn't miss it anymore. I missed the law enforcement, that's I like that, so I miss that. And I get my dose of it every once in a while. I'll talk to some of the officers or, I'll go and ride along from time to time. I haven't been quite some time, but yeah, I miss it, that part of it. But the other stuff, I really don't. But as far as like my identity, I'm just Kent Guinn, but what I'm doing now is I'm director of government affairs for a law firm called the Douglas Law Firm. And here in Ocala, we've got offices, northeast part of Florida. We've got former Representative Bobby Payne is our legislative affairs director. Another gentleman, name is Dr. Joe Savick. He teaches at University of Florida and speaks around the state of Florida on public affairs and governmental affairs and trains people and stuff. So he's part of our firm too. Yeah. So we have a great legislative group that covers all of Florida. Yeah. And just connecting people, just like I did with you. I mean, there's nothing more I enjoy than somebody coming to me with a problem and going, Jamie, Bill, Susie, you need to call so and so. They're looking for someone like you, or they can help you fix that problem, or they'd be a great partner for your business or a piece of real estate or whatever venture it may be that you're looking for. And it may be here, it may be in New York, it may be in California, it may be, whoever, or wherever. Yeah. But I love doing that. Yeah. So that hadn't gone away.
Yeah, that's dope. I was thinking about, and this is a deep passion of mine, identity. Again, I say there's two questions in life you have to answer. Who am I and where am I going? So when you mention who you are, you say, I'm just Kent Guinn.
Yeah.
But I want to dig a little further. Who is that? Like, who is Kent Guinn?
Well, I mean, let me tell you about, so I'm married for 46 years, got two sons, Michael and Cameron. Michael's in Tampa. Cameron's here in Ocala now, married. Michael's married. I've got 3 grandchildren. So, and my wife is a retired public school teacher.
Okay.
So, our life back when I was in office was like right, we live over in Woodfields. It was like right there. She was at Osceola, I was at City Hall. I had my business office downtown. And so that was our life. But I mean, that's who I am. But I'll tell you, like, where I grew up, and I know this is one of the things that you talked about, which really, I didn't get it until I started thinking about it. One of the things that you talked about with your kids, when you took them out to go to these different places, they go to the hospital, they go to the court, and they would see judges and lawyers and doctors and things like that. Then they get off the bus and they go back home and they would look around and go, is that real what I just saw?
Right on.
I don't see any doctors or lawyers or judges in my neighborhood.
For sure.
Well, when I grew up in the northeast part of town, just across these railroad tracks over here. And, my dad was a printer. He has a little shop in our garage where he started it all. And the neighborhood I lived in was a pretty tough neighborhood. You're more likely you're going to get in a fight either in the neighborhood or at school. And you better be, pretty tough if you're going to live in that neighborhood. And it wasn't a real good one. It was me and my sister. And so my dad worked real hard to get us out of there. And we moved, and I started going to Forest High School. And he opened his business down the street, built it up. When he retired, he had about, 9 employees. And he did real good for himself. But, it's amazing when you think about your parents, what they did for you when you're growing up, sacrifices, that they made. But, so yeah, I'm a kid from Northeast Ocala that grew up, I shouldn't say on the street. I went to church right down here in Wymeda Park, Baptist Church, my entire life, until I went to Highlands for a couple of years. And then my wife and I got married. We went to First Baptist, and I got married there. And so now I'm at Pastor Mark's church in Churchill. But yeah, so I'm just a kid, that grew up on this side of town, northeast side of town. I tell people, I joke with people, I said, if they looked at, Oak Crest Elementary or Fort King Middle Junior High School, we called it then, I would be the kid least likely to be the mayor. Man,
I was gonna ask you that, right? Because I was gonna ask you what at that young age, right? So before the titles, before all these, what did you even like the young kid? What did you aspire to be? Like, so for me, I always wanted to be an athlete. Like when you were a kid growing up, grade school, like what did you want to be?
Well, I mean, I played a lot of baseball from Tuscaloosa to Oak Crest Elementary, where that baseball park is over there, to Babe Ruth. And so, yeah, I loved baseball. But, I mean, I knew I wasn't going to be a baseball player. I wanted to be a lawyer when I grew up.
Okay. So so you
now work for a law firm.
I was about to say, so you achieved the dream.
Yeah, without being a lawyer. But no, I wanted to be a lawyer when I was growing up. There was a guy that was, name was Ben Daniel. He was my father's attorney, friend of our family's, always admired him and, just thought the world of him, knew his daughters, and went to school with him. So yeah, that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, you spoke about your parents, and education begins and ends at home. Parenting is pivotal, right? When I think about my life and think about like obviously God first, but then my parents. Sure. Like a lot of who I am becomes from the household I came from, the structure that was given to me. What type of values were instilled in you in your home?
So I didn't tell these gentlemen this, but so I was adopted. Okay. So my birth mother was a 19-year-old girl who got pregnant around Corning, New York, and 19-year-old girls in 1954 were supposed to be pregnant. And she came, I think, from a Catholic family. I've met her. So she took everything she had, clothes on her back in the suitcase, and told her mom and dad she was going to Florida to work. Her doctor there in New York somehow knew about Children's Home Society, whose board I served on, state board and local board, division board for 20 years, because I thought I should give something back to the people that made it possible for me to get adopted. My sister had been adopted 2 years prior to me. I joke with her, I guess you worked out, so they tried again. And so no, so they were, my mom and dad were, good Christian people, went to church there at Wilmington Park. He was a deacon. She worked in Sunday school, and so if it was a Monday that I was brought home from being adopted, Wednesday I was in church. I guarantee you.
Nice.
So they were a good Christian family, and so I grew up going to church. And they, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She would get up and cook my sister and I and dad breakfast before we even went to school. I mean, a breakfast.
Yeah, that's dope.
But it was just when you'd come home, she was there and everything, and we would joke. I mean, we grew up at a different time. Like, Mom, there's a fight down at Oakcrest. Johnny Mason and Rick Clifford are fighting. Said, we'll get a sandwich before you get in there and watch the fight. Don't get in it. No, I just want to watch. But it was just, you stayed out late, or not late, but when the sun was setting, you knew it was time to come home, or your dad would whistle and time to come home. That's your dad. Okay, I got to go home.
That's dope.
We play those woods out here by Anthony Industrial Park. That was our area. That whole neighborhood. That was us.
That's dope, man. Even think about, a couple questions. So when you think back to being adopted, it sounds like you won the lottery in adoption with the parents you had. But
absolutely.
Did being adopted affect you in any way? So a lot of kids that are dealing with adoption that they felt like they don't deserve, I don't deserve anything in life because the person that created me didn't want me. Did you deal with any of that?
No. My mom and dad, they got my sister and I one day. We were out playing in the yard, came in, sat down, said, they were real serious. So I want to tell you about this, and you're adopted, and explain what adoption was. And the sister and I looked at each other like, okay, we're going to go back outside. And it was just never a big deal. When I got to be, when I had my first child, when I was 28, and he was, so I know I was like 30. Well, you know what? I was on the Children's Home Society board at the time. So I want to meet my birth mother. So I wrote her a letter and to Children's Home Society, and they sent it to her. They sent it to her last known address, which was her parents in New York. They sent it back, said, this letter's for you. And she called, and we met, and she went up to Savannah, Georgia, and met her. She had gray hair like me. I was in the banking business. She was a senior vice president of a bank in Savannah. She married a guy in the insurance business. I was in the insurance business. It was wild. And it was, I've got a brother. I ate lunch with him every Monday. We tried it every Monday. It might be Friday, but I ate lunch, and he lives here. He was dating a girl here in Ocala, and they ended up getting married. Unbeknownst to me, he was here for 4 or 5 months at a time, and I didn't even know,
That's great.
Who was. So, one of the things I will say this, his name is Sean David Appleby, but when I first met him, I said, look, I used to run around the house and say, I wish I had a brother. If I had a brother, his name would be David.
Wow.
I said, so Sean, I got to ask you this. I said, what's your middle name?
No way it was David. Wow. That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah. Man, you're making me think back. So, especially even with you telling the Ocala stories, right? This place is a whole lot different than the one you grew up in, right? So you're fifth generation. It was like fifth generation. That's a long time. What did that even date back to? Fifth generation.
1850.
Wow.
I think we got like 7 or 8. So
that's a total difference. So tell me this: what's different from the Ocala you grew up in to the Ocala today? The biggest difference.
Well, I was talking to somebody today at our law. So I said, Ocala's still a small town in a certain way. People know each other, and we can connect with each other and things like that. But just the size of it, and a lot of the streets are still the same, and obviously what's on the sides of the streets has changed. I didn't even know, like I live in Woodfields. I didn't even know that Woodfields existed. We would go over to where the McPherson is. We would go to that was the girls' school where the juvenile girls stayed, and they would decorate their campus with Christmas lights and things like that. And so that was a thing that, people in Ocala would drive through the girls' school and see the Christmas lights.
Yeah.
In the House McPherson, the county administration office.
Yeah.
So things like that, Magnolia, we would go down there, and it had, diners and, coffee house, and, it was just different. Still a small town. Everyone knew each other. Back in the day when McCrory's was downtown where Doc Blanchard's office was, it caught on fire. It was in like the 1960s. Everyone knew that, hey, McCrory's is on fire. Let's go down to the square and watch it burn.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. But it was just, it was just small town Ocala.
Yeah. I was thinking about, so if you think back to 18, like even going back to that time, right? So Ocala was different. Just the world was different in those times. Sure. So you're thinking about over time being raised here. When it comes to the way, and so we're gonna get into that deep when we get deeper into like some of the allegations and things that came up.
Sure.
But like the way of thinking, do you think racism, right? We talk racism. Do you think racism is taught, or do you think it's like something that's in you?
Taught.
Talk to me about that.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. You see like young little kids and stuff where a little black kid and a white kid, they're best friends.
Mm-hmm.
How did that get from that to I'm 20 years old and now I've got, problems and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
It's taught.
Yeah.
Kids don't know that, he's black, I'm white, or he's, Latin, or I'm black.
Mm-hmm.
That there's, it's taught.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I think.
No, I think it as well. And the reason I asked that, because I was asking, because when you think about back to Ocala, the way in 1850s, right, there was a way it was that
right.
We know what it was, but over time, how do those things, when do we decide, oh, that's not the way we're doing things?
I'll tell you, and even like you're saying, but like in the 60s was a volatile time, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Ocala with civil rights and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
There was a guy, and I'll tell you this story, but there was a guy, and I can't remember his name, but I recognized him at council meeting on MLK Day. He was involved and worked in the White House administration with Kennedy. And he helped write the Civil Rights Act, literally.
Yeah.
He was part of the administration that they wrote it. It's just, it's definitely taught. There was something I was going to tell you after that, but I'll think of it as
Oh, it's cool.
Yeah.
But so think about this, even on top of that. So going into your public, because I asked those questions to lead into your public leadership. If you think about your long tenure as public leadership,
sure.
So from being a lawyer and all those different things, what led you to say, okay, I want to get into this?
Well, I'm not a lawyer. I just work for a law firm.
Yeah, my bad.
I gotta be careful.
We're wanting to be a lawyer. I mean,
wanting to be. I spent 46 years on my license, but 46 years in the insurance and investment business. But when you're on council, you could actually spend some time, working real, in the business. When I became mayor, and as Mayor Marciano will tell you, takes up tremendous amount of your time. And it did because I loved it, and I just wanted to do it and wanted to help people. And so I made it. I shouldn't say I made it take up a lot of my time, but it just did. And I loved doing it. I wouldn't trade a second. For that. I loved doing it. But yeah, I mean, and then again after I left office, I had been talking to another law firm about going to work with them, and also was thinking about getting back full time in the insurance business, and just decided I didn't want to do that. Wanted a new challenge.
Well, what led you to it? So what was the decision to say I want to run for city council? You get what I'm saying? What led you to that?
So we were at a baseball game, and somebody said, this girl, which I figured out later, she had a beef with a certain councilman, Mike Finn, and so she wanted me somebody to run against him. So she's like, will you do that? And I was flattered. Oh, sure. And so I did, and I lost. But it was good though, because what happened is it was the at-large district, and Andy Kesselring, who was in the District 4, which is actually my district that I lived in at the time, he left to go run for the county commission which that opened that up. And so then I ran for District 4 and won. And then Councilman Finn and I got to spend a couple of years on council together.
Yeah.
But she was a friend anyway, so it was fun. And then once I did that, I never had an opponent the next 3 terms, which are 4-year terms. And when Mayor Yours was his mayor term and my council term ended at the same time, I asked him, I said, Mayor, I said, are you going to run again? He goes, well, it was about 4 months out. He said, I'm not going to run. I said, well, you know what? Thinking about that, I said, I think I'm going to run. I've done what I wanted to do on council. I don't want to run for that again. I'll run for mayor. And I had 2 opponents, Randy Alberts, who's running for commission now, and Rusty Jurgens, who cuts my hair.
Yeah, that's good.
Great guy.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I was in a runoff with them, won that. And then the next term, I didn't have anything, no opponents. And then Billy Gilchrist, and then Barbara Fitos, and then a lady that worked for the city, and then I think Manal for Corey. So I had 5 elections.
Yeah. No, that's dope, man. I want to biggest takeaways. I think this is a pivotal thing. So from city council, I want to, after your 12 years, what was your biggest takeaway from it? And then as a mayor, those 12 years, what was your biggest takeaway from being mayor?
So council, the thing that we did was, develop the downtown. That was a big thing. I mean, we still have that document that we go by as we're developing the downtown. Here's a story. This is a great story. I saw a picture of this gentleman the other day. So there's a guy, his name's Patrick Hadley. He's an African-American gentleman. He lived in West Ocala. There were probably 18 murders. It's just 18 murders within 4 blocks of his home. Wow. He used to sell peanuts out on the street and everything, and was a real big advocate. Started Mad Dads. Was the chair of Front Porch that Governor Childs asked him to chair in Tallahassee for the state. Well, he came to me, or we got together, and we went, you know what? Let's do something for West Ocala that's not a program for the sake of having a program that'll actually make a difference. So he, his wife, and myself sat in my office just like this. He's sitting there, we're like, okay, so what can we do? What can we do? And his head's like, right here. And I looked up and I went, there's a picture of the Children's Home Society board from 1906 on my wall. It was Jacksonville, where I was born. Well, I said, Jacksonville. I said, they did an enterprise zone. Let's do that. And so it gives you a lot of tax incentives and things like that. You can hire people in the zone and outside the zone, and you get more credits if you're in the zone, and hire people in the zone. And he goes, well, how do you do that? I go, well, I said, let's call Chuck Chestnut. He's our state rep. And so we called him, and he said, well, that takes an act of the legislature to do that. I said, okay, let's do it. So he sponsored us on the House side. Senator Evelyn Lynn did it on the Senate side. We went up there, and I did, and by myself. And so it was real difficult, a lot more complicated than I thought. And there was a certain guy, his name's Speaker Marco Rubio. He's the speaker at the time, Secretary Rubio. And, Chuck was a Democrat. And so at that time, he was not going to let any bill on the floor that had a D in front of it. And so it never made it to the floor. And then next session, Kirk Kelly, who's a Republican, and Senator Lynn again sponsored it. And Speaker Larry Creedle becomes Speaker of the House, and we get it. And then FedEx came, and all that. That's where it is. But my point in that is, and I said this put a Facebook post the other day. Glenn Fiorella put something on there, and I responded to it. He and Patrick were there for Mad Dads 30 years ago. I said, isn't it great when 2 people that don't look like each other get together and try to do something good for their community? For sure.
No, for sure. No, and that's what it's all about. And that's why I always highlight the story that I tell you. I'll never forget when I first got back, and I don't know how it got on me. I don't know if a picture of me and you went out or how somebody knew, but anywho, it got back, and I was I was on the west side of Ocala somewhere, and somebody came up to me and just being blank, like what said to me. They say, "Man, you up there talking to that C word? You know what the C word is? The white guy. You up there talking to that?" But that was the interaction I got, and I've never been a person to deal with people off of like what the target. I deal with you how you treat me. You know what I mean? I always been that person, and what you did to me, I didn't even know at this time. I didn't even know of any of this stuff that they were talking about. Right? I was just coming back. I had been gone for 8 years. I wasn't looking up local what was going on. So and then I started looking into some of the stuff. All right, but that ain't how you treat me. I don't know I don't know your experience, but that ain't our relationship. So I totally get. But the interaction with different people working together, is the way to go. So but to the one thing I'm thinking about leadership, I want to dig into the leadership part really, really deep. One thing I was thinking about, do you think a leader can make everyone happy?
I told Mayor Marciano, I said, you ain't pissing 50% of the people off. You ain't doing your job.
Yeah. No, and that's the reason I asked that question, because we know some things came. So over 24 years of leadership, I do think it's hard not to make or to make someone upset. So how did you process criticism as a leader? Like, how did you go about processing?
I just knew that if you're doing the right thing, the rest of it's just a bunch of bluff. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
If you're telling the truth and you're doing the right thing, the criticism's going to come. And, it's like, I'll tell you, when I first became mayor, 2 weeks from them, there's a guy, Chief Williams, the African-American, their chief of police. I had talked to Deputy Chief Rodney Jenkins, Rodney Smith, and then, the chief, and I was telling them, like, here's what I want to do, and, so on. I want to pursue people. I want to hit the drug dealers real hard. And, Chief Williams, he really didn't want to, pursue people and, do a lot of that stuff. And I talked to Rodney, and, he didn't really want to do some of the stuff I was wanting to do either. So it got time for, it was a Christmas party. He goes, can you come back to my office before you leave? He said, I've got to go somewhere at 2:00. I said, sure. Came back and he sat there and he goes, look, he said, I've done this for 40 years. He said, I don't want to do any of the things that you want to do. He said, I'm going to resign. I'm retiring. And he pushed this resignation letter across the desk. And I said, well, are you going to retire like right now? Or, and he goes, no. He said, the end of January, and I said, okay. And so anyway, I walked out and called Greg Graham. And I said, Greg, you'll never believe what's happened. I said, Chief Williams resigned. And then I said, would you be interested in coming back to Ocala? And he goes, well, I said, what's the weather like? And, I said, typical December day, 70 degrees in the sunshine. Yeah. And, and he said it was like, 20 there or something. And he goes, get your votes lined up and I'll talk to Amy and we're on our way. I'm on my way. And so, I got my votes lined up and we had probably a 3.5 hour council meeting, and people were going back and forth. Well, you're doing it wrong. You should have got a committee together. You should hire Deputy Chief Smith and this, that, and the other, on and on and on. And, I joke with Fulton Wilson. Mm-hmm. Fulton got in some trouble, and of course, Pastor Tolbert, but Fulton was there, and he goes, yeah, he said, Greg chased me real hard and put me in prison. Yeah. And I looked at her and I said, well, Fulton, I said, don't you think that other young men deserve to get chased and put in prison and turn out as well as you do?
Yeah, if that's the outcome.
And he started laughing. Yeah. He said, but you should still hire, Rodney. And, and finally, at the end of it, Pastor got up, and I can't remember his name now, I'm sorry. He goes, because they were talking about process. And I said, look, Pastor, in this flawed process that you accuse me of taking, had I have chosen Deputy Chief Smith, would that have been okay? He paused and he goes, of course it would. He laughed. He said, of course it would. We'd be happy. We wouldn't even be here. And everybody burst out laughing. And I said, call the roll. Yeah. And so, we had Greg as our chief, and, then unfortunately he passed away. And then, Chief Balkins, our chief. But no, we spent a lot of time in West Ocala and, the amnesty program and, all those things that we did. with drugs and rehab and, you know, a lot of different things.
Yeah. What was the hardest part? What is the hardest part or the hardest decision you had to make? If you could think as a mayor.
Gosh, there were a lot of them. Yeah, you never wanted to say no to people. You know, you always was one of Greg's rules to just look for ways to say yes, and that should be, you know, citywide, countywide, everyone. You know, try to figure out, because I got the role of you're a public servant, and the people that, you know, are coming to you, they're my boss, you know, and I know that, you know, I'll get to the hardest one. But I had my phone number published. I didn't know that it was there because someone called me one day and they called me on my cell, and I said, this is early on. I said, how'd you get my number? They go, well, I just called and asked for the office of the mayor, and you answered. And so I called the telephone company, or T-Mobile or Sprint or whoever it was. I said, look, I said, the person called, and it says if you call, you know, ask for the office of the mayor, you get my cell phone number. They go, yeah. And I said, they said, you want to change it? I thought for a second, and I went, no. I said, I want people that if they want to talk to me, my number should be published, and they should be able to call me anytime they want.
Yeah.
I said, okay.
Yeah.
You know, and people stayed that way, you know, until I left office. But the hardest decision I made, golly, I mean, there are a number of them, but I mean, I really, you know, can't think of anything off the top of my head. I mean, I just, you know, always trying to find a solution. So, you know, maybe come back to that because I can't think of it.
No, I got some. We got some follow up for you right now. We're gonna get into a couple of the allegations, so this might stir up some thought process. Sure. So, one of the biggest things that came up was with the police department situation, the sexual harassment deal that came up. So, when you're thinking about that decision, what went into the decision, because I think it was more so a lot of folks were saying that you were quick to back before knowing information, and so what did that whole situation? Where's your takeaways from that whole situation?
Well, I mean, hindsight being 2020, I should have probably paused, and you know, maybe not been so favorable as I was. Turned out I was right, but yeah, I mean, I said, you know, I support Greg, and I knew. Well, I got to be careful what I say here. But I knew the situation behind what was going on there. So that's why I was so favorable towards Greg. I mean, that happened 4.5 months later. They came out and said that. I mean, I was in Washington. I wasn't around them. I had my own hotel, and I went back and I'm early to bed and, you know, some cookies and milk and went to bed at night. You know? I didn't know what was going on there. But had there been, you know, something that serious, take it as the next morning, go, Mayor, we need to take you aside. We need to tell you something that happened. They didn't. They didn't say it then. They didn't say it next month, the month after that, the month after that, the month after that. You know, they waited until their disciplinary hearing was coming up so they could, you know, get out of that and, you know, bring this up. And, you know, so yeah. And then, you know, there was an attorney, Bobby Frank. She was, you know, we agreed to disagree, and she did a great job representing her client. I'll say that. She's very vigorous. And, you know, now I kind of understand how lawyers, you know, work. You know, she's doing her job. You know, I didn't like her at the time, but, you know, she's doing her job. Actually, I called her to help a gentleman that had an issue with the school board. I said, would you represent him? And she called me back and said, I can't. I can't take that case. I said, well, I appreciate you, you know, call me back and let me know that. But I thought you're a real strong advocate for your clients, and that's what this guy needs. So yeah. And I, you know, one of the things too is, you know, when people would campaign against me, those were the first people I went to and said, how can I help you? How can we work together? And well, I'll tell you this. This was a great story. There was a gentleman, Mr. Poole, Mel Poole's dad. He was in the military, very distinguished Marine, I believe. And we had a meeting before that council meeting, 2 or 3 days before, when we were appointing Greg. And I said, you know, let's you and I meet, let's talk. It's okay. And so he came out of the elevator at City Hall there on the second floor, and then all these other people started coming out. with Phil Jenkins and, all the, leaders in West Ocala.
Mm-hmm.
I know I was going to tell you. I'll tell you about the seal, city seal, how that happened. So anyway, so they came out, and then we all sat around the table and everything, and they grilled me like, this, you should hire this. And so anyway, we went through the council meeting I told you about, and Greg got appointed. Calls me the next day, and he goes, congratulations, you did a good job. He said, I would have done the same thing you did. Now let's work together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we did.
Mm-hmm.
Millpool.
Yeah.
Millpool.
Yeah.
But the way that, let me tell you, I lost my train of thought earlier,
Mm-hmm.
how the seal got done. So the charter of the seal was done in the 60s, right? During that time that I said was kind of tumultuous time. And so when things would go on in the city, people would come to the chief of police, Kenneth Alvarez, who the building's named after. The mayor at the time, Mr. Kurt, and Mr. Cunningham, who owned Cunningham Funeral Home. At the time he was on city council. And there was one other person, and I cannot remember his name. One of the Kurt family told me this, but they would, people would come to him and go, hey, this is going on. They, okay, let's, deal with that and fix that problem, make sure it doesn't become a big problem and, sort it out. At the end of their meeting, they would stand in a circle and hold hands and pray. And the end of their prayer was, God be with us. And so they were doing the seal at the time, and they said, hey, let's put God be with us in the city seal. And that's where that came from.
Yeah. Seals.
From all that.
Yeah. Okay. So, I was trying to think back because you went back to the beginning. But no, I get what you're saying. But so to keep my train of thought, I was trying to, with the Greg Graham situation, so that the allegation situation, you say you moved. In hindsight, you say you could have took a little more time. Could have paused before you made a decision. But then you say you also knew you were right because of different other things. And even if, so say the situation was flipped, this person that was coming up with these allegations, you were on that person's side, right? And a person like you decided to, I guess, back the action or back whatever you get what I'm saying? So just reversing the things, you get what I'm saying? You understand it from that side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's what I was thinking about. But anywho, next one, the KKK situation, right?
Yeah.
So the way it's written up is that your name, your name, right? Your name was in the record somewhere tied to KKK. I got a couple questions, right? One, because I know you denied it publicly and did that and all that different things. So I want to ask you the first question is, are you a part of the KKK? Two, if not, how did your name get it in these things? Like, how did your name get there?
Well, we don't know for sure. We can't prove it. However, there was someone at the council meeting that I denied them having something they wanted. And then a few months later, this came out, and I think I know where it came from, but I can't say. So this happened on a Monday. This list came out on Monday, and our public information director came. She goes, Mayor, said, you need to come look at this. I said, okay, I'm in the middle of something. She said, no, you need to come look now. I said, what is it? And she said, she showed it to me. It was me, 4 other mayors, and 4 United States senators. And so there was a real list that was going to come out on Thursday of political people that were involved in the KKK. So this was a group, remember the group Anonymous? They would come out and do things. So this group, people that did this, was on some website. You don't know who's publishing it. And I can't remember the name of it, but they were pretending to be the group Anonymous. So they had our names out. And so we started calling, the different city of Lexington, their mayor, another lady out in Kansas City, or I can't remember, St. Louis or something, her. And I said, what are y'all going to do? And they go, well, and we called, Senate office. Senator Cornyn, John Cornyn, he was one of the ones. So what are y'all going to do? And they said, we're not going to do anything. And they said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I got news trucks circling City Hall. I said, I got to do something. I said, I can't, I'm not going to just sit here and, let people think that I'm involved in that. So I called a press conference, and, TV, not TV 20, but Channel 6 came up there, and they got microphones all in my face and stuff. I said, calm down. I said, doing it at 3. I'm doing you a favor so you can get it on the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll be down there in a second. Just calm down. And so anyway, so I went down there. I said, I never have been. I am not now, nor would I ever be in the KKK. I hate and despise everything they stand for. And so this one lady, she was a mayor in the Midwest city. She goes, I don't know where they got my name. Said I'm a lesbian married to a Jew. Yeah. Said they should have done their homework. I don't think they let me in.
Yeah.
And so anyway, there was this station in Jacksonville. They did a real good story on it. Said this guy's not involved in that. NAACP came out here locally, said he's not involved in that. We don't believe that. And I was a member of allegedly the Kansas City KKK.
Wow.
So I was going to meetings in Kansas City to meet.
Yeah.
So anyway, so then the Thursday, the real list came out, and everyone in that group, who was the real anonymous, we don't know who's the members of it, but they said, well, we appreciate the efforts of the people that put out the list on Monday. We would rather have a shorter, more accurate list, and those people are not members of the KKK.
Yeah. Wow. So,
and that was that.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks later, I think I told you this morning, 2 weeks later, a guy named Lorente McCrae calls me. And my assistant at City Hall, she came in and she said, Lorente McCrae's on the phone. I said, who's Lorente McCrae?
Yeah.
And she goes, you don't know who he is? No. I said, he goes, well, he coaches ball evidently, played for the Gators. And I said, okay. So I said, hey, Mr. McCrae, I said, how are you doing? And he's good. He said, look, he said, I saw that, on the news about you being in the KKK. He goes, you're my mayor, and I want to get to the bottom of this. I said, okay. And I said, I'm not. And he goes, okay. He said, well, we started talking. And then finally he goes, he said, you sound like you're a man of faith. I said, I am. And I said, you sound like you are too. And I said, I said, there's a verse in the Bible. I don't know the chapter and verse right now. I said, I do now. It's Genesis 50:20. I said, it says what God meant, or what men meant for evil, God meant for good. I said, whoever did this to me meant it to hurt me. I said, but it's turned out good because I've met you. And so he goes, well, I want you to come out to Denver to see me play, meet my mom, go to a game, and I want to get to know you. I said, great. So anyway, so I flew out to Denver and spent the couple night in the hospital before I went out there. I thought I had some kind of stomach problem. And so anyway, so I went out there, met him, met his mom and everything, watched him playing double overtime against the Patriots and beat them, and then went on to win the Super Bowl then after that. And, a great guy. We've stayed in touch. And he had gotten some trouble himself down in Lake County. His attorney asked me to come down, and speak on his behalf. And I stood in front of a judge and and did that. And I said, Your Honor, I said, as head of the police department, we chase a lot of people, and there's some bad people out there. I said, this gentleman, I said, he's not one of them. I said, he's a good man, and, show him some leniency, and, I appreciate that. And he goes, well, Mayor, that means a lot. You coming down here to Lake County, and saying that. And I said, yeah. I said, I mean it. And then, so anyway, his stuff went away. And I told him, I said, Lorente, I said, the only reason why they pursued this thing longer than 5 minutes is because you're an NFL football player.
For sure.
Period.
Yeah.
It's a great news covered.
Yeah.
Sells good. Yeah. NFL player. I said, but other than that, I said, don't worry about it.
That goes into the importance of personal relationship, right? Because that experience that you had with him, he was able to identify who you were. The experience I had with you, were able to identify. But me and him probably were the only two black people that didn't think you were racist. Everybody else probably still. But seriously though, that is
except for Frankie Lee Brown.
Probably about five of us. probably about five of us, right? But for the most part, like that thing that happened to you, unfortunately, that happened to you, that taints a whole, like, you really can't come back from that. A lot of people aren't going to, unless they get this, they aren't going to see you other than them.
And I didn't want it. I mean, I knew it, but that it wasn't. But I didn't want people like yourself, who I didn't know you at the time, or Lorente, or friends of mine out in the black community, to think, oh my gosh, he's involved in the KKK. I didn't want it to be hurtful to them to think that I've been associating myself with somebody as a member of that hates me.
For sure.
Yeah. So no.
Yeah. So next one we'll talk about, so the growth of Ocala. During your tenure, there was a lot of economic growth that happened here in the city. So a lot of people right now, they're probably blaming you for the direction of Ocala. You the one that started this. So what you had to say about that, sir?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's, I think, a lot of good growth. I know Councilman Musley and I, one time we were out in the elevator after council meeting, we had just approved a bunch of stuff, and I said, man, we're growing pretty fast. And he said, yeah. I said, well, the only alternative is a moratorium on growth. I said, we know what that, and he said, we know what that looked like during the recession, and that's not good. And we didn't bring that on ourselves. He's just got to be smart about it. The infrastructure, some of the infrastructure hasn't kept up with the growth. And I mean, the reason we did 31st Street was to take traffic off of 17th Street, because a lot of people, you would use 17th Street to go to the mall and go through all that 200. Now, gosh, you can just jump on, 31st, take out 42nd, right to Heathbrook, and never even be on,
for sure,
7th Street, 17th Street, 200. So that's a wonderful. However, that's getting even crowded, and it's like, got to be something else. They just did 44, it parallels I-75. I think that's going to be a great road. Take a lot of the traffic off 75 and get from one side of the town to the other. So yeah, I mean, they're doing good. It's just we've done such a great job of building a great community. Everyone wants to be a part of it. Yeah. And with things going on in different parts of the country, Ocala and Florida look pretty good to a lot of people.
Yeah. Too many people.
Yeah, all right. Oh yeah. Well, and to that, I mean, I think I was telling them the population of Ocala right now, I read something yesterday or the day before, is 70,000 people. But right now, the CEP did a study, and between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., there are 250,000 people in the city of Ocala right now.
That's crazy.
While we sit here. So when you're driving around, you go, this doesn't look like 60,000.
Yeah.
It's 250,000.
Yeah, floating around. That's crazy. Another thing that I want to talk to you about. So your long tenure, right? So 12 years as a mayor, that's a very, very, very long time. So you came to the decision, you chose not to run again.
Right.
My question to you, did the powers that be come to you and say, hey, this is enough? Or did you really opt out and say, all right, I'm done? Or did someone shut you down?
Well, 2 years prior to that, I didn't want to run. And so I talked to Greg, and he said, come on, Mayor, you got to run, man, and okay, I said, but, I'm like getting close to being like done. And I said, but I'll run again. I told Ben, I said, Mayor Marciano, I said, he came and said he wanted to run. And I said, well, he said, are you going to run? And I said, there's about a 99% chance that I'm not going to run. I said, I haven't decided yet. And so, truth be told, started getting these phone calls saying, hey, I hear you're not running. And I said, I'm probably not. I haven't decided yet. Well, Mayor Marciano, I said, you're not going to run, and, this, that, and the other. And so, he, qualifying is like the end of June, middle of July. So in April, I said, now officially, I am not going to run. I'll tell everyone I'm not going to run. So, that was that. But yeah, there were some people said, wrote me letters or one particular emails that, look, you're getting older and this, that, and the other. We'll let a young guy run. And, I said, whatever.
Yeah.
They've all come in the office and said, hey, I want to be the mayor. Like, okay, see you on the campaign trail.
Yeah.
And would have been the same thing there. I would have just
No, and I was going to.
I would have went out and campaigned and hard. And if people wanted me, they wanted me. But it wasn't. Nobody told me you can't run me. People don't. I don't work like that.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to tell me what to do.
Okay.
Like I went and spoke at the AA meeting at the centers, SMA, and there was a guy in there, and he said, "Look at this face." I'm looking at him, and he goes, "You remember me?" I said, "No." I said, "I don't recall." And he goes, "When you met me?" I go, "No." He said, "Well, you were out. Bunch of people, you were out campaigning on this corner of Pine and the Boulevard." I said, "Okay." And he goes, "I was walking across the street, and you said, 'Hey, wait a minute, come here.' He said, and you went over your car and you gave me $100.
Yes.
I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." And there was a guy at Richards that used to give me money and said, if you see someone that you think, needs some help, give it to them. So I gave him a $100 bill. And he goes, when the next time he saw me was? I said, "No, sir." And he goes, "I was over by Richards, and you came over and you're taking my picture, and I was holding up a sign. I was, begging for money, and you said you're going to go to jail." And I said, "Yep." And he goes, said a lot of people out there, half the people out there, everyone thought you're an asshole. I said, "Okay." And I said, "I'm just doing my job." And I said, "Well, what happened?" He goes, "Well, I ran. I was scared." And all that.
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay." He said, "But I want to do this." He said, "Yeah, you saved my life." He said, "I finally, after all that," he said, I came to the bottom, and I've been here at SMA so I've been sober for 6 months. I've been here for 4 months." He said, "I've just turned my life around." And he said, "I want to thank you for saving my life. Had you not done that, I wouldn't be here today. I'd be dead."
Yeah.
And I've had a number of people come up and thank me for having them arrested.
Yeah.
And being a jerk or an asshole to them. At the time, they thought that, but in the end, they knew that, I was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I will never apologize for doing the right thing for
sure.
things like that.
Powerful. So
I don't, as long as you do the right thing, I really don't care what people think about me.
Yeah, I got it. So the second part of that, so you were scared to run against Ben.
Pardon me?
So you were scared to run against Ben.
Was I scared?
Yeah.
Of course not.
No, it's okay.
No, I mean, well, the email, I've still got the email. I can't remember who. Leo Smith wrote me the email and said, "Look, Harry, you're, we need a younger blood and there and this, that, and the other." And I wrote him back. I said, "Look," I said, thank you for the email. I'm very confident that I wouldn't have a problem, defeating someone that has absolutely zero experience in politics or, doing this. So, but, I said, I don't want to run. I said, I don't have to, make excuses. I mean, I got nothing to prove.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done it.
Yeah.
I got nothing to prove.
Yeah. So
And if you talk to him, I mean, he'll tell you the same thing, which I told him. It's going to take a lot of your time. It's going to take a lot of, away from your family. Like my son was in the ninth grade. So ninth grade football was on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. We used to have council meetings on at 7 o'clock. So I missed every one of his ninth grade football games, except for one. They played Vanguard, and I got to go to that because something happened at the council. We didn't have a meeting that week. And so, no, you sacrifice. I went to every one of my son's baseball practices and games and stuff like that. I could do that. But yeah, no, you sacrifice, for your family.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this, like my priorities in life were my faith, the citizens of this city, my family, my business, and then I would put myself last in everything I did. Last. I need to make sure everyone else is taken care of before I can be taken care of. And so 2 weeks after Graham died, I saw Amy out on the sidewalk, Amy Graham, his wife, and I was telling her that. She goes, "Mayor," said, "you might want to flip that family citizens thing.
I was just going to ask you about that. I didn't know if
Because families come and go, so those citizens will always be there.
Yeah.
You need to make sure your family a priority in your life.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you that. I didn't know if you accidentally did that, but that's really how you went, the city, then your family, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, people used to say, you're always, taking care of everyone else. That, when you take care of yourself.
Yeah.
I go, a lot of times I don't.
Yeah.
When somebody asked me, so how did you find balance in Ben asked me that. Mayor Marciano asked me, I said, how'd you find balance in your life? And they go, Mayor, I said, I didn't.
Yeah.
I said, welcome to my world. I said, you'll see. It's tough.
Yeah, totally.
I think he's done a better job of it than I did. With my kids, when I was mayor, I mean, they were adults. So, I didn't have young kids like he had.
Yeah. So I was thinking about it. So all those 24, those years and time in mayor, when you think about leadership, right? This is the time I want to give some leadership lessons to.
Holy Land Foundation was the other group that United States versus the Holy Land Foundation.
Man, your mind, he be throwing stuff, he be throwing me off, man.
Getting older,
he throwing out stuff, he throwing me off.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to think about, so the mindset that you had to be in all those years to be able to stay at or do your job at the rate you could, and then also what separates the leaders that last as long as you did and the ones that fade away.
I mean, I didn't get burned out. I mean, like I said, I enjoyed every minute of it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But I think about this until, the end. Well, I guess I thought about it during my term, but I would compartmentalize everything. Like if this was something really bad was going on, I could put that over there, and then, hey, this guy, we're celebrating his success for this. And but you've got this lawsuit or this going on. I'm not going to worry about that. That's over there. I need to focus on helping this guy out or this lady out, or, I just, if you can't separate all that stuff, it's like the President of the United States, whoever, Obama or, whoever, think of the things that they have going on, all these things all over the world they're dealing with, but they're laser focused on whatever's in front of them. And that's the way I would try to be. And like I said before, if you just always tell the truth, you don't have to worry about, the criticism or anything. You're right. I'll tell you one thing that I did during COVID. COVID was a terrible, terrible time in our city. It divided everyone. Were you here during 20?
Yeah, 2020 when I came back.
Yeah, okay. Mask, no mask. I vetoed that mask ordinance, and people thought, oh my gosh, the world had come to an end. I bet I got probably 700 emails that were favorable, said thank you for doing that. I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse, I wear a mask all day long. I ain't going into Publix wearing a mask. I hate that. I'm tired of wearing a mask. I do it all day at work. One guy who was a COO of a eyeglass manufacturer in Portland, Oregon, sends me this email. I hope you die. I hope your family dies. I hope you die. And what an idiot, what a moron for vetoing that ordinance. You don't respond to stuff like that. But I'm thinking, your city's burning down, number one, at that time. They were having riots and they were burning the city in that chop zone. And I said, you're banging out emails during the middle of your workday to somebody you don't even know in Ocala, Florida, about a veto of a mask ordinance?
For sure.
It's like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so that all went away. But fast forward to I went to this conference a couple of years called the Yale Mayor CEO Conference. So about 35 mayors, 35 CEOs. So the CEO of Pfizer is there talking about COVID and this, that, and the other. He said, any questions? I said, yeah. I said, well, let's take a deep dive into hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. Tell us how good those work. He's like, this is the guy in back of him. He was the Albert Coe. He was the head of public health at Yale. He goes, yeah, Mayor. He said, we did use them and they did work. And, but we thought that they harmed the heart, so we stopped using them. And so fast forward the next year, they're going around the room and the guy that led it, a guy named Jeffrey Soenfeld. He goes, well, Mayor, he said, you're a real trailblazer during COVID. And he said, isn't it nice when science finally catches up to where you were?
Yeah.
Yes, Jeffrey, it is.
Yeah.
And I knew I was right the entire time. I knew that masks didn't work. I knew that ivermectin that they did work. Hydroxychloroquine worked. I had a guy that called me, and he said, my sister-in-law's in, she was at admin now. She was actually a nurse. She was down in Winter Park. He goes, and I've got to get some blood. They were doing that plasma transplant.
Mm-hmm.
And the mayor of Miami said, if you can get your mayor to do it, I'll do it. I'll do it too if he has a match. So he called me. So will you do it? I said, yeah, I'll do it if it's a match. And mine wasn't a match, but he found it in Minnesota, and he called me. Goes, I found it, but they won't let me bring it to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, so I got some FDA people on the phone, and they laughed and they said, of course he can transfer it to Florida. I said, the blood doesn't know what state it's in.
Yeah.
He saved his sister-in-law's life with that.
Yeah.
But all that stuff during COVID, I'm going to write a book about all that.
I'm about to say
that was terrible.
Hindsight, right? A lot of people would look.
It wasn't even hindsight. I mean, I knew that I was right.
Yeah.
Somebody said that the other day. Well, 20 hindsight being 2020, you knew now, or no, now you're right. So no, I knew I was right then.
Yeah. I'm talking about for most people. People would look back and be like, he was right, or because a lot of people made a lot of noise about the bells thing, but that was. But one thing I do want to know as we're wrapping up, what decision do you feel had the biggest long-term impact on the city during your tenure? Like, what one decision, if you could think to the decisions you made and think the biggest impact on the city?
Gosh, I guess two things. One with drugs, the amnesty program.
Mm-hmm.
When I was speaking out at the AA meeting out at SMA the other night, there were some guys that raised their hands. Oh man,
mm-hmm.
Raised their hands. I'm here because of the amnesty program. The guy that was saying that I saved his life. He goes, yeah. He said, I was thinking about coming in, but I wanted to go hide my dope and everything. But he said, he said, I heard that you could go in there with your dope on you, and I just said, hey, I got to do this. I need help. And I went in. They took my dope and got rid of it. And they brought me out here. That was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So wow, beautiful. So I would say that. And then when we had probably 28, 30 fentanyl deaths, overdoses that died, I formed a group that was mayor's drug advocacy, or I can't remember what they called it, but yeah, we had about 128 people from all different walks of life, from medical to legal, nurses, doctors, came to the community room at the police department, said, yeah, this is a problem, let's get together and do it. And one of the things talking about, like off into this, like leader, I mean, I don't think you're a leader unless people follow you. I just happen to have some good ideas, mm-hmm. and people were kind enough to go, hey, Mayor, I think that's good, I'll help you. Mm-hmm. And we brag about our community, about how helpful people are, and and that's what I love about it.
Sure.
You came to me for help, and I want to help you.
Yeah.
But if you say I need your help and no one follows, that's a different story.
Different story for sure. When you look at the Ocala today, what makes you proud?
Gosh, probably the people are the biggest asset in the city, but what we did with the downtown,
mm-hmm.
Where it was, 20 years ago when I was growing up, it was a ghost town. Where District Bar and Kitchen is,
mm-hmm.
there was a hole in the wall, and you could buy a hot dog. I had a little window there. You could buy a hot dog out of that window.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's just, where we've come, and, getting the whole community together to embrace that, downtown development, and saving the buildings that we saved and what's being done now. It's just, a testament to our community, and, what a great job, not just me, but, other leaders in the community after that, it had done, it wasn't one person, it was everybody came together and did that.
Yeah. What advice would you give to someone who is stepping into leadership for the first time?
I would tell you, which is what I said now, just, always tell the truth, govern from your heart, and, don't worry about the criticism. If you're doing the right thing, the rest of it will all fall in place.
Yeah. What do you hope people remember the most about you, about your leadership?
The dash. Yeah. That I cared about this community, that I loved the city of Ocala and the people in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And hopefully it reflects, when you drive around and see what we've done, what we've accomplished. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So that I cared about this community.
Yeah. No, I love it. What's now? The goals now? Like what's now? Mayor's over. I know that's every day you woke up as the mayor of Ocala, focused and with a mission at hand. So when you're waking up today, what's the mission? What's the goals? What's the focus?
Focuses on serving people in the law firm position that I'm in. People say, well, what are you doing? I said, I'm doing a lot of the same things that I did, as mayor and council member. I'm just getting paid for it.
Yeah.
They come and, hey, I've got this problem. I'm doing this development in this area. I want to do this project, that project. Can you help me? I said, yeah, client of our firms, we'll represent you, and get that done for you. So, we do that, and I'm having fun, doing it and, making money. Being the mayor and council member, you get a few $100 a month. So you do that goodness of your heart, and you better have another little job to, unless you're just, independently wealthy.
For sure. One thing I like to wrap our podcast up saying is speaking about the name of the podcast, exposure leads to access. So you mentioned it in the beginning, how I spoke about the boys and what exposure does when you get introduced to something and it opens doors, it broadens your horizons. I want to know what exposure, like what has exposure done for you in your life?
I think it's made me, because I was kind of a shy kid. I think it's made me more confident. And doing a lot of things, and maybe more outgoing, and my hair on my back goes up when if someone tries to attack somebody or take advantage of somebody that in the community. Like,
for sure,
we ain't having that.
Yeah,
you're not going to do that to that person. And I've seen a lot of people try to do it.
Yeah,
I've supported people in our city employees that the city has tried to do that too over the years. So we ain't doing it. And citizens, you're not going to do that to them.
Yeah, no, that's
so. I'm more confident in being bold as far as my faith and my helping people and supporting people. It's like this thing that we did, the atheist lawsuit that we're involved in for 10 years. Turned out all right, but the Supreme Court was looking for cases that they could rule on that would bring back the original meaning of the Constitution. And at that time, it was the freedom of religion and the free exercise thereof, and it was about standing. That football coach, Joe Kennedy. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
So, his case went to the Supreme Court, turned it down, sent it to the lower court to fix it. It's exactly what happened in our case. Justice Gorsuch said, and he was on the dissenting side, he said, while I agree with you, the dissenting side, he said, we're going to send it back to the lower courts and let them fix it. And if they can't fix it, then send it back to us and we'll fix it here. Justice Thomas said, look, this is ridiculous. So let's go in here now and let's fix this. Said, you just can't drive around the country and be offended and sue people. Said, these people have no standing in this case. And with, Joe Kennedy, the football coach, it was people in the community saying, Coach, you can't go out on the football field and kneel and pray. They were offended. They don't have any standing to do that.
Yeah.
So, like me driving through Kansas or something, seeing a cross out in a cornfield and going, I'm offended. I'm going to sue that guy.
Yeah.
You're not having any standing for that. You're just driving around being offended.
Yeah. They don't make sense.
And so, city council, decided to, finish it. And other people, the atheists, said, okay, we're out, you're out. Let's just call it a day. And, that was that. And I wanted the Supreme Court to rule on it because it would have so much more effect, around the country.
Yeah. Man, I greatly appreciate this conversation, man. I don't know if you've sitting down with anyone else after your tenure as mayor, and after thinking about New York coming on, man, I couldn't wait to have you on.
Yeah. It's fun.
And yeah, man. So I appreciate you for joining me. Thank you for who you are for me and who you were for the city. And man, we appreciate you for joining me. What we got to do, stop what you're doing right now. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Again, another great episode. I know a lot of people will be coming on the tune, so making sure you're hitting that subscribe button, the like button, and comment. Comment something you learned, and share this episode with 3 people. All right. So I always like to end the episode with, I guess, so you're gonna look over in there in that red camera, that's yours, and in the way you feel led to, wherever God leads you, if it's words of motivation, if you just want whatever you want to say to the people as you close out, the floor is yours.
Sure. No, I would just say, first of all, thanks to Jamie for, number one, originally contacting me and meeting him, and the relationship that you and I have. And I would say, thank you to the people of the city of Ocala, for allowing me to, serve you, for 24 years. And I get that I was a public servant. You elected me out of the citizens of this city to come and serve you and be your mayor, be your one of your city council members. So I appreciate that, and wouldn't trade it for anything. So I've enjoyed it, and thank you again.
Yeah. Let's see y'all next week, man.